My aunt is calling me an absolute fool. Why would she ever do that? Well, it's because I divorced my husband after just 2 months from getting married. Yes, I know, after I said that, I do sound like a fool. However, when I break down this story to you, you guys are going to realize it's not me that's a fool. Oh no, it is my aunt. Before I got married, I used to think that there was no secret my husband would keep from me that could make me break our marriage. I believed everything could always be discussed as husband and wife, but when I found out that my husband was not really who I thought he was, I could not get what I had seen out of my head. I had to end things. He betrayed me and played on my intelligence in one of the worst ways possible. Frank and I have been lovebirds for almost 2 years before we officially tied the knot. I met him at a mutual friend's housewarming party and we got along well. He had come with a group of his friends to the party, and what started out as 2 strangers just talking about life, careers, business, well, it led to multiple dates and a great relationship. When Frank and I started going on dates together, I didn't actually think it would lead to something serious because I felt I was out of his league. He was a real estate agent and a successful one at that. I'd seen the caliber of people he spoke with at the party, and I didn't think I was a fit. He was just up there at the totem pole of money, and I was down here struggling to pay bills and meet my daily needs. When my family found out that Frank and I were in a relationship, they were happy. My parents loved him because he was always so well put together, and my aunts and cousins who had met him could not stop praising me and asking how the heck I met him. Aside from him doing well financially, Frank was good looking. He had a healthy glow, had a gym routine, and took care of his overall health. In fact, it's because of Frank that I returned to the gym after skipping almost a year. He's literally obsessed with good looks, and he even had the kind of morning-night skincare routine I've never seen any lady have in my life. Once in a while, I'll agree that I used to feel intimidated around him, but he influenced me and pushed me to do the little things that made a difference. After dating for a few months, I also met Frank's parents. They lived in a different country, so we had to travel down there to meet with them. They welcomed me with love, and I got to find out that Frank's dad was one of the biggest real estate consultants in his state, and Frank was just the chip off the old block. He was also doing great financially, and by simply spending the weekend with his parents, I saw where Frank got his perfectionist from and go-getter attitude. Now, I know this is a little bit embarrassing to share, guys, but now that I share my story, I know I made a mistake on my end, and I should have dug deeper for answers when I noticed some things were off. So, when Frank and I were dating, our intimacy life was a 1 to 10. Yeah, 1 out of 10. We never really had a chance to do it. There was always a dozen of excuses from his end, and it's either traveling for work, busy making phone calls, or he would even claim he's tired. I can even count the number of times I tried to seduce Frank, but it didn't work. Most times I would buy sexy lingerie, dress up nasty, and do things I would not do on a normal day just to get him, well, in the mood. But he would always turn me down. The most annoying of it all would be him leaving me at his place on a weekend to go and hang out with the boys. I tried everything possible as a woman could to get Frank to touch me, until I got tired and decided to stop. In the beginning, I did not think it would be a big deal, but after about a year of dating him, I began to feel very lonely in our relationship. He was actually good at spoiling me and getting me material things I asked for, but he was never available to satisfy my needs. There was even a time this led to a very big fight, and we actually almost broke up. When it happened, he had already proposed to me, and we were in the middle of planning the wedding. To make up for what he's done, we got intimate that night, but I could tell that his mind wasn't in it from the get-go. This forced me to start thinking from a different perspective. In the past, I've heard of people who did not like intimacy so much. Not like I was a freak or an addict. My cravings were normal, like any other woman would crave from her man. So I assumed Frank was not one of those men who were crazy about intimacy, and I stopped being so hard on him, and we moved on with our wedding plans. His parents specifically asked him to take care of our wedding since he was the only child. They did this because they were excited that Frank was finally getting married after so many years of procrastinating, and because they were anticipating a grandchild from us. Well, honestly, his mother was one of the kindest women I've ever met. She treated me with so much love, just as she would have treated her own daughter. I'd built a very close relationship with her, and Frank used that to manipulate me when I wanted to call off our wedding. From the hall we were using down to the wedding gown I wore, his parents took care of all of it. Eventually, when D-Day came, we had a beautiful wedding, and a few days after, we went on a luxury honeymoon. Now, at the vacation, I was thinking things would be different between Frank and I. I'd packed a lot of things to spice up our intimacy all throughout our stay here, but none of that was necessary because I could not get Frank to sleep with me. I was frustrated, and that pushed us to have this giant fight. We were countries apart from where we lived, and I thought we would have a time of our lives since work or his buddy would not come in the way. I was wrong. Every other tourist or people we had seen there looked very happy and they were enjoying their stay, or whatever they were doing there, but mine was different and Frank did not seem to care. He would even go as far as to leaving me in our hotel room to spend time with strangers at the bar. The last time we got intimate was the day before our travel, and he decided to touch me because I've been yelling at him since our wedding night. I can never forget that honeymoon because I went to bed every night waiting for Frank or thinking there was something wrong with me. Anytime Frank wasn't at the bar to talk to strangers or walking by the beach to cool his head, as he claimed, he'd been on the phone talking to his best friend Eric. You see, Eric was a fellow real estate agent like Frank, but unlike Frank, who came from old money, Eric was only starting out on his wealth journey. I thought of calling up Eric several times to report Frank to him since they were close, but I could not bring myself to do it. I believed a matter like ours had to be kept private and thrashed between the two of us. At one point during our honeymoon, I decided that I would not let Frank ruin the rest of my honeymoon, so I decided to stop bugging him and focused more on having fun, with the time that I had left here. Aside from paying for our wedding and paying for our luxury honeymoon, Frank's parents also gifted us a home. Yeah, believe me when I say that it's a pretty big and fancy house. To be more specific, the house looked like a vacation destination. The outside view was everything, and I loved it there. I think 5 months after we got married, I began to suspect that Frank was having an affair. Our intimacy life had gotten worse, and each time I complained or even tried to make these sexual advances, he would yell at me and leave the home. His meetings with clients were non-stop, and things got so bad that I would have dinner alone and still sleep off waiting for him. The reason I just suspected that Frank was seeing someone was because one night, he returned home and was talking to someone on the phone. I was already asleep right there in our room, but the echo of his voice from the corridor woke me up. He told the person that he had just gotten home and that they had a great time, and they would definitely meet again the next day. I didn't need a psychic to tell me that he was going on about because everything was clear from the way he sounded. That night, I tried to go through his phone like I had read in many stories from here, but I wasn't very successful with that. For the weeks that followed, I continued to monitor him closely and listen to his phone calls. Most of the time, whenever he and his friends were having their boys' time in the house, I preferred to stay back at home and serve so I could listen to their conversation, but that did not yield anything. Exactly a month later, I made a shocking discovery that changed and burnt the little thread that was left of our marriage. Okay, are you ready? That day, I had gone to work, and for some odd reason, I discovered I was purging. Earlier that day, I had stopped by my favorite cake shop for a small piece, but I think the chocolate cocoa in it was too much and it disturbed my stomach badly. At 5 p.m., I was supposed to go home, and I got excused from work by 2 because my situation was dire in my stomach. When I got home, I noticed that there were 2 cars parked in the driveway. One belonged to Frank, and the other belonged to whoever was in the house with him. I was kind of surprised to see Frank's car parked at the house by that time, so I rushed home to use the toilet. As I got to the house, there was very loud music playing inside, and when I did not see Frank and the other person in the living room or the kitchen, It raised my suspicion immediately, because of the loud Tupac rap that was playing in the background. Yeah, Frank is a huge fan of Tupac. Frank did not hear me pull over or even hear when I came into the house. Instead of using the toilet downstairs that was closest to me, I decided to go out to the room upstairs to check and see if Frank was in there. As I approached that room, I began to hear it. Loud moaning. And the moans blended with the music. My heart fell in my stomach immediately as I pushed the half-open door to see who Frank was with. I almost passed out in disbelief. Guys, right in front of me, Frank was standing behind Eric. Eric, his best friend, who was bending on the bed. And you know what they were doing? I screamed at the top of my voice, and when they realized I was in the room, they rushed to pick up their clothing, but it's too late. I'd seen enough. I was so disappointed and I felt betrayed I could not even say anything to him, and I left the house immediately. I even forgot about my stomach issues and drove straight to my parents' home. That whole evening, Frank kept calling me and sending voicemails, but hey, I didn't respond to any of them. Not even once. I don't know how he figured I was at my parents' house because he showed up that same week. I was forced to speak with him. It turned out that Frank and Eric had been gay partners since high school, and they have been in a relationship for years. The reason he married me was because his parents were beginning to get suspicious. So he dated me as a cover-up to take his parents' attention from his, closeness to Eric. Believe me, guys, when I tell you I was shocked. There I was, in our marriage, thinking something was wrong with me. I was literally a love-struck puppy, not knowing that Frank never loved me. He actually dated and married me to cover up his sexual preference, and he left me to struggle on my own. As if all that was not enough, he begged me to come back. And, that would change. In his words, and I quote, "Oh, I'll try to balance things up between you and Eric. I really need this to work, Clara." Guys, I'm not against his sexual preference. That's not what is wrong here. What's wrong here is that he lied to me and used me to cover up his sexuality. He didn't even think about my feelings and my preference for life, and I wanted a normal life with my husband. He was a coward and a cheater. I'll never forgive him for that. Already since that day, I could not get the image of what happened and what I saw out of my head. There's no way I could go back to being with Frank, not after everything I'd seen and been through in his hands. So I told him that I'd contacted my lawyer, and when the divorce papers were ready, he would get them. When I told my family what happened, they were so heartbroken and very disappointed in Frank, but nobody could say anything to me. Long story short, Frank and I divorced after being married for only 6 months. The months were processing our divorce. It were the longest of my life because of how hurt I was. Still, he begged me to not tell his parents why I was leaving, and I didn't. Also, only my parents knew about the exact reason why I divorced Frank. Whatever he did to me, I didn't want him to get embarrassed. A month and 3 weeks after Frank and I were officially over, we had a family gathering and almost everyone attended. So there's one of my maternal aunts, Estelle, who I did not used to get along with right from my teenage years. She only got to know that Frank and I discovered when she came from the family gatherings that weekend. While we were eating as a family, she kept asking me questions about me and Frank, and they were really getting on my nerves. At first, I answered her stupid questions, thinking she would be sensible enough to stop asking, but she wasn't. When I stopped answering, she became angry and embarrassed because everyone was looking at us. She started mocking me in front of everyone and said that I could not even stay married for a year because I was still immature. She even went as far as calling me a fool for leaving my good and rich husband's house. I was so mad when she said that, so I asked why she wasn't married yet despite being so mature. Estelle was in her 30s and she had never been married. She was the kind of lady who jumped from one man to the other, provided they could take care of her bills. My comeback made her very mad and she yelled at me and left the table. I did not see her again until I left that day. My other aunt told me that she was so mad at me and she claimed that I disrespected and embarrassed her in front of the whole family. Funny enough though, she was the one who started it, and she could not even stand me throwing back same things at her. So, a month after this incident happened at my parents' house, one of my cousins called to ask if I had heard what happened, and when I asked her what she's talking about, she told me that Estelle was now engaged to Frank. Yeah, my ex-husband. Honestly, I did not believe her until I checked my aunt's Instagram handle and she had posted their engagement pictures. I was shocked by my morals and I reached out to my aunt immediately. I found out that after we exchanged words at the family gathering, Estelle reached out to Frank and they started, things without wasting much time. I called her and tried to explain to her that she was making a terrible mistake. I reminded her that Frank was gay and that he was only looking for a marriage of convenience so he could use her as a cover-up for his real relationship. Despite everything I said, Estelle refused to listen. She even said that I was jealous of her happiness and future wealth because Frank dumped me and picked her over me. Okay, the truth was Frank did not pick her over me. He was desperate, and at the moment he didn't even look at the woman. So she would be, a good cover-up for him. Meanwhile, my aunt is, a chubby person. So it's very obvious that she was older than Frank, but he still didn't mind. Estelle even told me that she learned from Frank that I was cheating on him. So it made sense why he divorced me. Hearing that made me so angry, so I told her, "Don't come crying to me tomorrow," and I stopped trying to convince her. I suspected that she went to Frank to prove a point to me, so I decided to mind my business like she had asked me to, and I watched how things unfolded. After their big wedding, I knew it was only a matter of time before she realized the deep crap that she's gotten herself into. Well, 2 weeks ago, which is exactly 4 months after she married Frank, Estelle reached out to me and begged me to help her. I'm sharing this here because I've been trying to avoid her calls for the past few days. But guys, 2 days ago, she showed up at my house unannounced and was in tears. I told her I could not help her because I'm a fool who already warned her against marrying Frank, and now she's making me feel like an absolute terrible person. So I ask you guys this: am I the a-hole for telling Estelle that I simply can't help her? I think she's gotten what she deserves, so she doesn't have to put that on me. Update number 1. Hey guys, thanks so much for taking time out to comment and leave your suggestions on my post. Yes, I do believe Estelle brought this for herself. Wow. Right from when I was old enough to understand her personality, I knew she was always just looking for rich men. The kind of man that would take care of her, pay for her vacations, and give her that princess treatment. It's even more reason she did not get married because she was looking for a man that would match that caliber. Personally, I just don't feel bad for her in any way. I forgave her for humiliating me like that in front of everyone and still reached out to her before she officially tied the knot with him. If you ask me, I'll say their marriage and relationship was rushed. That is, if they even had a relationship. No one meets someone and gets engaged in 30 days. Not unless you're setting yourself up for a disaster. But since she desperately wanted to prove a point to me that she could get married, she went ahead to marry Frank of all people to spite me. She ignored all my warnings and warnings from the rest of the family because she wanted some lavish wedding. On the other hand, Frank was using her, but she didn't see that because her eyes were on her future wealth. LOL. What's wealth without happiness or enjoying a man? Like I mentioned earlier, I knew it would only be a matter of time before she would leave the marriage. But now the problem is, Frank does not want her to leave the marriage. Now, the reason she's been calling me because she wants to break free. But Frank is giving her a tough time, and this was the little I learned before kicking her out of my house the other day. She starts yelling at me and blaming me for this mess, and that's something I simply cannot tolerate, especially after I literally warned her that she was about to fall into a ditch. Hey, she didn't listen. Some of you commented that I should give her a listening ear, and have decided to do that so I get the full gist and see the look of regret on her face when she narrates her ordeal. I'll make another update once we have a face-to-face conversation. Anyways, thanks guys. Update number 2. Hey guys, thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate them. In my last update, I said that I would meet up with my Aunt Estelle, so she could tell me everything that happened. So we met up yesterday and I got the full gist. Again, I want to say that Estelle deserves everything that's happening to her and I feel no remorse for her. It was her greed and selfishness that left her in this kind of situation. So, according to Estelle, she found out that Frank was gay on their honeymoon night and she found out in the funniest way possible. Meanwhile, in their 1 month of dating, she never got intimate with Frank because of how busy they were. Also, Frank was also traveling and she was stuck with planning of the wedding with his parents. So she thought that everything would just be the way it should be after they got married. Oh boy, was she wrong. Estelle said on their honeymoon night that she dressed up looking nice for him after they had settled at their destination, and the moment she got in bed to get started, Frank pushed her away. At first, she didn't understand what was happening, and she made a second attempt to touch him. He pushed her again. Then he got up from the bed and told Estelle to her face that she's not his type and that he's gay. He literally told her that he only married her so his parents would not believe what people were saying about him. The funny thing was, Frank said he was telling her very early, so he would not end up breaking her heart like he broke mine. Estelle claimed that it was at that moment she knew that she had been played, and she remembered everything I told her. To show how greedy that she was, she did not attempt to leave the marriage immediately. She decided to stay and see the little way she could enjoy Frank's money and keep some for herself since she had signed a prenup. Unfortunately for her, it was more difficult than she thought because Frank did not like her. He was plainly using her, so aside from taking care of groceries, buying gas for her car, and taking care of other small house bills, she could not get anything from him. I decided to mock her like she mocked me and asked her why she wanted a divorce so soon, and she answered that she was stuck in a lavender marriage. LOL. Despite her the more, I told her that all she needed for the marriage to work out was her maturity, and she didn't need to leave a good, rich husband. These were the exact words that she told me the day at the family gathering, and I felt so fulfilled telling her the same thing to her face. Anyways, I'll make another update soon, guys. Final update. Hello guys, thank you for being so patient with me to take this update, and I really thank you for all your comments. I think I forgot to mention in my first update that when my family kicked against Estelle marrying Frank, she told me that she didn't care. She even told my mother and my other aunt that she did not mind cutting them off to be with Frank, and that really hurt them. It was the reason none of us attended her wedding, not even any of my cousins, and Estelle didn't mind. She had invited so many of her friends to her lavish wedding, and she didn't care if we were in attendance or not. Now that she's in a mess, she has no one to turn to because she chose the wealth she didn't see over her family. Since the last time that we met, she's been very desperate and has just been crying to me to help her. We even met again some days ago, and she told me that Frank even brings Eric to the house and they'd be making out in their presence. It's almost like she does not exist to him, and that's really driving her insane. Till now, Frank has refused to sign the divorce papers, and something tells me that he won't be doing that anytime soon. My guess is that Frank knew Estelle did not come to him for love, but for the money, and he was smart enough to sign a prenup. The funny thing is, Estelle had been bragging to her friends that her life was about to get so much better, but so far, I think it's gotten worse. She's stuck in, her lavender marriage, and Frank has even given her permission to see somebody if she wants, but on the condition that they will never, ever divorce. That's right. He had also given her another set of dumb rules, and they're very funny. I'm really enjoying making this update because everything turned out worse than I imagined. When I told Estelle to not marry Frank, she said I was jealous of her, and even made up a lie that Frank said I was cheating on him and that's why he divorced me. Now she's miserable, and I think the only thing comforting her is her fake life on Instagram. where everyone believes that she's having the marriage of her life, because of the kind of pictures that she posts, obviously. Each time she calls me to ask for help, I make sure I insult her to my satisfaction, and I always remind her that she's a fool for allowing wealth to deceive her. And get this. I forgot to add that Frank was really spoiling her while they were dating, so that must have blinded and deceived her into thinking the more wealth was waiting for her. Oh, poor thing. As it is, I've blocked her from calling my number anymore. I don't want any negative energy around me since she wanted to show me I was immature. She would use her maturity and fix her marriage, right? I wish her the best with Frank. Thank you, guys, for all the support so far. I sincerely appreciate you all. Your comments, your suggestions. You guys rock. Alright, so let's just break this one down because this story was not like a story we see very often. I'd say the comments were split 50-50, and here is where everyone's opinion starts to differ. A lot of people were saying, you know what, I'm not going to actually call Frank the a-hole of the story because a lot of people were feeling sorry for him, saying that he has to hide his sexual preference from his family, he should be able to be free, he should be able to love who he wants to love, and yes, I totally agree with that, but the problem comes in when a lot of people are saying, yes, I understand that point of view, however, he's still hurting all these women throughout this, specifically OP, who was madly in love with them, and she thought they had something real when it turns out that isn't the case. I want to know your thoughts though. I think, in my opinion, the evil person of today's story has to be the aunt. She's the only one who was really just evil, going after money, trying to make OP look less of, well, what she was, and I just want to know your opinion on today's story. Drop it downstairs in the comment section, guys. My name is Mr. Reddito, and I narrate these sort of stories every day. So if you want to be a part of these, go ahead, click that subscribe button. It does help out the channel a lot, so don't forget to hit that bell notification as well. I'll see you tomorrow, and remember, it's cool to be kind, guys. See ya!